Well, it's good to be with you. It's actually awesome to be with you as a family. This is the Underground is now really a part of my family and my future. We've planted a couple churches, and on this sort of third go-around in a little town called Alton that I'll tell you a little bit about. Even before we got there, I was thinking, once we knew we were going to be there, it was like, I wonder what we're going to do. And I just remember thinking, I bet you'll be something like I've seen in Tampa. When people ask me around the world, are you seeing anything that gives you hope for the church? I always go to you guys first, honestly. I go, you've got to see what God has done. I've connected very well with the Birmingham Underground. They've coached us a lot in what we're doing now, but Brian's become a very dear friend, and I'm honored to actually have you introduce me, especially to say those types of words. Brian did get a chance to see me sort of hanging out with some guys in our city when he came out to visit at his own expense and his own time, and so it's good to address you. I'm also just really glad to be with Frosty, as we call him. Mike Frost has just been, in the last 15 years, sort of the missional conversation, which I really think is something God started with the church. It was really started by Mike and Alan Hirsch and really bled into the U.S., and they really highlighted our story. That's kind of what launched our story. It was really these guys saying, look, you should look at what these guys are doing, and some of our writings came out at a very similar time, but it's been literally the highlight of my life to get to travel and to speak a lot with Mike and to go to places where he has been, and then I end up being there, and anyway, it's just like I was very excited to just hang out with you. Brian asked me to speak about Proclamation. I'm also thankful for that, but I thought I better tell him like the real story because I am not a speaker. In fact, I almost stopped doing ministry preparation because I had such a fear of public speaking. My father saw this fear, and as I was getting athletic scholarships, he said, I'm not going to let you take a scholarship unless you're willing to take a speech class. And I almost chucked it all. Somehow I got through that, but it didn't get any better. College, when I was supposed to give a 2-minute book report, I literally almost quit college. It was that painful for me. Ended up going into seminary. Had a panic attack during an oral presentation, passed out. Woke up, I have no idea what happened to this day. I just went, never had a panic attack ever in my life. I just remember starting to sweat and going, and then, boo, lights. Ended up working for Youth for Christ and going into high schools and really starting to find some favor, starting to get my, feet under me, realizing I had some gifting towards people outside of church. And then they asked me to speak at a baccalaureate address. And I remember the day they asked me, I literally, you can ask Cheryl, I went into a cocoon. I did not want to speak publicly. It was at this big Catholic grotto. There were going to be 2,000 people there. And I remember I got such dry mouth driving to the place. I was desperately looking for a water fountain. There was no water anywhere in the Catholic campus except the holy water and I was just in there just lapping it up, and this monk comes in, he's shaking his head. I'm like, but that's the real Hugh Halter, the idea of speaking for anything, especially God, literally was the greatest misery of my life. And then eventually, in our first church plant, every Sunday, I would literally pull over in a movie theater parking lot in about a mile from our church, and I would vomit in the bushes. It was my little spot. And then I would head on to church, and I would get her done, and then the next week would start again, and bleh, and then wind it up. And, Cheryl actually got to where she was like, I think you might have a problem that you need to address. And I was so uptight about speaking that, literally, I couldn't take her out for a date Friday and Saturday. I was so uptight about the Sunday presentation. And so to think that I would be speaking to you about Proclamation is a little bit funny. Why do people? I've told people, they go, well, then why have you done it? Why have you signed up for it? And this is the honest story. As I was thinking about what to say to you, when I was in 5th grade, somebody proclaimed the basic message of the gospel and I walked an aisle in the middle of a Nazarene church. And by 8th grade, I was already asking God to change the world with me. And like the simple gospel message began to make a change in me. And it was a slow change, and it always has been. But I think about what I'm doing in my life. I think about what has happened in the lives of my children, and the fact that they've all joined me on our 3rd mission to Alton. I think about all the experiences that we've had, looking back, scrolling back through 2 churches and looking at pictures out in lakes full of people getting baptized. All these memories of people said, oh, that dude will never come towards Jesus, and then remembering the day that he did. Just like hundreds and hundreds of memories of people that were literally, it wasn't just that it changed their life, but it changed the entire legacy of their history for generations, just because they heard a simple little message about, somebody proclaimed, they spoke it, and then somebody heard it. And so I go, I don't care how miserable I am, I can't not say something about Jesus and to speak of him. Case in point, this last week, very difficult week in Alton. We opened up this coffee house restaurant event center that will really be the center of sort of the underground network in our city, and it's been so well received, such beautiful favor. The people are very thankful that we've done this in this town. And yet there was an initial core of people that we really met early on, and it was hard to help them find a place in the story. They had lots of visions and dreams, and I kept going, look, it's going to be a year of just fixing this building, so come help us fix it and work with us. And it just was a struggle. It just didn't work. They didn't show up, and I kind of lost a little bit of hope. And then just a couple days ago, got a very painful email from one of them. Found out later the email was sent to everybody before it was sent to us, and it was one of those, we've talked a lot about it when you're doing things. There is an enemy, and there are people that just don't see things the right way. It's not always a demonic thing. It's just sometimes people are people, and they get hurt. And so we had a situation this week, and the email was so painful, and it was so full of accusations, and I normally have learned to kind of deal with it, and I just couldn't. I was up at 3 a.m. pacing, trying to figure out even how to get clear of it before coming to this event. I thought, I just want my mind clear. But it was, have you ever had those moments where just literally you are nauseous, you can't eat? It's just, my wife read it, she was flattened by it, my children, after I told my wife, don't let the girls know what's going on, she did, and they were wrecked by it, broken by some people that they know, and it became a family pain. And I was pacing the halls the other night, and I walked in and walking back and forth, and I got hit with a bunch of water. Somehow a leak decided to leak right then as I'm walking down the hallway, and I remember getting annoyed, oh crap, now I got to attend to that tomorrow. Tomorrow's the day I write the email to everybody, straighten it all out, defend my honor, do some disciplining, some correcting, and now I got to figure out how to get the thing fixed. So I go to the coffee shop in the morning, and I literally sit down early. I get in there about 4 a.m., do the toilets, and then I sat down I'm going to get this letter out before I leave. And I began to draft it and type it, and all sorts of stuff happens. Can't get to it. Finally, the guys call me, and they say, we need to come over in about a half hour. So I get upset, I got to finish this corrective letter. But I got to go now let these guys in to look at the roof. So now I'm sitting in my living room, and the guys forgot the caulk. I go to Home Depot, and so I'm I should have went and got my laptop so I can finish this letter. And but I just sat there and started thumbing through my phone, Facebook, and all of a sudden there are all these stories of Billy Graham's passing. The one that just shared the simple proclamation. And one of the stories was a woman by the name of Kathy Lee Gifford. I'm not a big Kathy Lee fan. I'm not a big daytime TV guy. But it's something about her talking about Billy Graham, and so I just kind of clicked on it. I'm just kind of watching it, and she begins to speak about Billy's simple message and how it changed her entire family's life. All of her family came to faith, and And then I scrolled through a few more. I just started to see all these people that just said, yeah, when Billy said that, it all changed. And in that moment, Billy saved me again. And I'm serious about that. All of my anger and the need to defend myself, my desire to hurt back and to give a little spanking, it all went away because somebody once told me that there's an element of truth in every false accusation. And all of a sudden I realized that if somebody had not told me verbally about Jesus, I am everything those people are accusing me of. Maybe not in this one situation, but you just let Hugh Halter be Hugh Halter without the work of Jesus in my life, and I am the worst of all those things. And all of a sudden, nothing mattered, and I deleted the entire message and just wrote them a simple little, I love you by name. I named every person. I literally was filled with absolute love for all these people, genuine love. And I said, look, when I get back from my trip, we will work and reconcile. Just give me a few days. But this is why we speak and proclaim of Jesus, is that at the moment, any time in your life, you might have heard the message 30 years ago, but how many of you still hear from Jesus on occasion? And it changes everything, doesn't it? What better privilege could we ever have than to learn to speak of Jesus? Why would we just do good works and not tell them our motivation at some point? Why wouldn't we? If it's been so good for us, why would we hold back? I've had friends get mad at me. They found out later, and they was like, thanks for telling me, knucklehead. So some of my greatest regrets. And so I just want to just give you a couple thoughts, not to guilt you into talking about Jesus. I hope that Mike and I tonight both just free you up, just give you a love for the message again. And for me, proclamation is not this big word proclamation because of our son's epilepsy our whole life. I actually had to leave seminary 2/3 of the way through. I actually had to stop taking, at the time I was taking a homiletics class and a hermeneutics class and a Greek 2 class. And I was told that unless I study the Greek 40 hours a week, I'm to be behind a pulpit. And God pulled me out of that because Ryan was having so many seizures. I had to leave all the training for speaking and just become a house painter. And Cheryl and I had to learn how to just open up our front door to our friends. And so proclamation became not this big, massive thing. It became learning how to talk, human to human with our friends. And in Portland, Oregon, our living room began to fill up with friends that were coming to Jesus. And we taught people to just simply do that in your home. And then we moved to Denver, and the same thing. Ryan was still having lots of seizures, so we just said, let's open up our front door. I was still painting houses. The house began to fill up again. And it just became so natural just to talk. We never actually had to go at people. They always seem to, the scriptures talk about be ready at all times to give a defense. It's just as if people kept coming, saying, hey, can we do lunch Tuesday? Just have some stuff I want to run by you. And so, again, now we're in Alton. And we have this weird story emerging around a building. And I have never been able to speak as much and as deep about the Lord as I have in these last probably 8 months. It seems like it's right in front of us at all times, but for many of us, we walk our whole faith life and we do amazing things, but we have this inner, why don't I get to speak of Him? How many of you feel that way? I want tonight that you would all just feel released. It will come. It will come. You should expect it tomorrow. The Spirit of God has anointed me. Right? Remember what He said? Right when He begins His ministry, Luke 4, He reversed back to Isaiah 61. The Spirit of God, right, has anointed me to what? To proclaim good news. And then all these beautiful redemptive acts. But don't forget that the Spirit of the Lord will anoint you to also proclaim. A couple of things that maybe would help. Understand, proclamation is never in a vacuum in a missionary context. Okay, what I mean by that is I live in St. Louis area, was working with a Lutheran denomination. There's more Lutherans in St. Louis than anywhere in the country. And we were talking about the new mission field, and they said we never had to worry about this stuff before because as people were colonizing the St. Louis area, we could not build buildings fast enough. So all they had to do was build a building and appoint what they called preachers. So the name was the proclaimer, the ones that speak. It would just the places would just fill up. I said, yes, that works in a non-missionary context. But when you now live in the new America that is a full-on mission field, you can no longer just proclaim in a vacuum. It's now going to be a progression, if you will. Nobody is going to necessarily just show up in the building anymore. Agreed? And so if we cannot expect them to come and hear us, by the way, if they ever come in and they hear us, yes, I believe that the word will never return void, but we have to remember that they're just simply not going to be there. And so now proclamation is not this one-time thing you do and you dump the whole truckload on people. Proclamation is a progression that begins to unfold as you live your life. When we showed up in Alton, we didn't know anybody. We just knew God wanted us there, and we went, let's just go find some people. And so we invited ourselves to a few parties. We met this couple named Bo and Terry, and Bo and Terry invited us. Well, it was actually at a restaurant, and we were down on New Year's Eve, and we get done eating, we go back to the hotel, and it's New Year's Eve. We have nothing to do, so I said, hey, let's go back and act like we have nothing to do. Maybe Bo and Terry will invite us somewhere. So we go down there, and sure enough, I'm like, hey, Bo, what are you guys doing New Year's Eve? What do people in Alton do? He goes, oh, we're going to a big party up on the hill. He goes, like, what are you guys thinking about doing? I'm like, oh, I don't know. We'll go down to, like, maybe the gas station, get a deck of cards, play. I mean, we don't know anybody. So they're like, oh, no, you're going to come with us. We're like, oh, no, we can't impose. And so pretty soon we find ourselves at a party. And met a guy, and just about 4 months later, the guy on our second lunch says, hey, get in my car. I want to show you a few buildings I own around town. And it's like, oh, good, nice little history lesson. And he takes me in front of this beautiful old federal post office. It's kind of the crown jewel of our city right up on the hill. And he goes, I just want to give this to you. I was like, it's just funny. Just kind of, it's a progression. Stuff starts, but you got to start somewhere. Invite yourself to a party. Start talking. We joined a CrossFit gym, and we started to hang out as a family. It's where we went every day, and we started to get to know about 100 people. And when things were, I thought, pretty copacetic with quite a few of them, because I would always stop and I'd go, CrossFit gym, everybody just is talking about working out. I would walk up to guys and go, hey, Joe, how was your week? And Joe would go, really bad. My wife, I caught her sleeping with another guy yesterday. I go, hey, how about lunch? It's like, yeah, thank you. And so then I would get to speak of Jesus to that. Just try to, everywhere I was at, any person, just try to say, hey, how you doing this week? It just seemed like people would actually tell me. And we just progressed our way down, and when we thought that we had the vote, I just sent out an email. You will not find this in the Billy Graham Book of Evangelism, but I just sent out a Facebook post to all of our CrossFit guys. I said, whiskey, meat, fire, men, Halter House. And 25 men showed up. And I just asked them, I said, have you guys ever had a place where you could just talk about life, kind of get mentored? And none of them ever had. I said, I'm love to do that. Just love getting to know you guys. And so we met once a month. And it was just 2 months ago that Cheryl and I just thought, we're starting to really feel like it's time. And so I just went to quite a few of those men, and I said, hey, got a crazy idea to run by you. We've gotten to know you guys really well. You kind of know us, and you've helped out at the building a lot. Really appreciate it. But Cheryl and I we really love you guys. Always would tell people that we loved them, because we did. And I'd say we just kind of want to open up our lives to you a little bit more, and we're not sure if you'd have any interest, but we're just going to start a time in our home. Probably every other week we'll get together, and I just want to go through the teachings of Jesus with you without any religious BS. And I don't know if you'd be interested, and every one of them have said, yeah, we'd love to. It's just a progression, right? It's a running conversation. You don't have to worry about dumping the whole truck on people. You don't even know the whole truck, right? So proclamation is never in a vacuum. Even Jesus remember John the Baptist? Why didn't Jesus just show up and just start talking at us? Why didn't he set up a website and just run the scroll? Here's the new deal, guys. Why did he have to wait? Why did he say, this guy's going to make straight my path? Because somehow we don't understand that God sees that proclamation just by itself doesn't really do anything. There's a setup of timing and individual people, unique circumstances going on in their life, and it's not time yet. It will be, so we're just going to move it slow. And so John the Baptist prepared, he's almost like a front band for Jesus. Well, I found that to be the case. Oftentimes people go, well, Halter, you just lead people to the Lord. No, I don't. Most of the people who have come to faith in our lives have been genuinely a 2 to 7 year story with hundreds of meals and parties and helping out and serving and going to their kids' stupid t-ball games. And that's why, remember, secondly, proclamation should always be connected to what we call the Incarnation. Okay, if you proclaim with that, oftentimes Mike and Al will often encourage us, don't just be missional, be incarnational, right? Missional just means to go. Incarnational is how you go, so you should go the way of Jesus to people, right? Well, in the same way, I would say don't proclaim unless you also incarnate. Proclaim the way Jesus did. It means that the medium is the same as the message. The Word, what? Who is the real Word? What's the real proclamation? The message, right? The Word became flesh and made His dwelling among us, and so we were able to perceive the glory of God. That's a story about living proclamation that helps people see who God is. That's why Jesus came to earth, not just to die for your sins, but to teach us how to walk in the world. And Jesus jumps into the human condition because there's so much religious garbage. Nobody can really see the glory of the Father outside of all those religious boxes. And so Jesus comes in an earth suit, and He walks for many, many years in the neighborhood. And He starts to help people to go, wow, it's not like what I thought it was. I actually have told this to many people. Evangelism today in our context is not going to be so much about telling people something they've never heard. It's going to be about helping them to see it's not like what they think it is. That's why you are so important now in this process. You must enter the human relationships the way Jesus did. And Jesus did not stand on the corner with the megahorn. Jesus didn't just dump the whole truck when somebody would bring a question to Him. Every single conversation was so uniquely different. It's as if Jesus understood that there's a way to speak. It's not just about speaking. Does that make sense? And so it's a running conversation. It's a running proclamation. It's really a conversation you have because you live life with them. You've been with them. One of the guys that was, as we were renovating the building, his name was Jason. He was my plumber. One guy. Took him 6 months. So every day, literally, it was just me and Jason. And a bunch of guys from another church came and helped framed up some bathrooms, and their last hour, they just wrote scripture all over the building and big highlighting markers. And I remember thinking, I wonder what Jason was going to think about this. And, the first day, Jason came in, didn't say anything. Second day, I saw him reading one through kind of some of the 2x4 studs, and I thought, I'm not sure how that's going to go. And, a couple weeks later, he goes, so, you got a minute? I'm like, yeah. He's, so I think I've read most of the Bible now. He goes, so, what's really going on in this building? And I said, how much time you got? He's like, well, I'm going to take a break, 20 minutes. I said, it might take that long. And I just told him about what Jesus did in my family back in Denver that had us all think about coming to Alta. He asked. So I said, these are people that really care about what we're doing. They've all been really affected by the Jesus story, and that's it. And so after that, Jason began to share all sorts of stuff. Every day he wanted to talk about something in his life, and we got to say everything about Jesus, about the cross, the whole deal. And it was the same story to him the other day. I just said, hey, Jason, Cheryl and I are thinking about getting a few people that we've met around town together every couple weeks to just study the teachings of Jesus. And he had introduced me to his girlfriend a few times. She'd come in to give him some lunch, and he's like, man, we would love to do that. So you see, this is not a weird gimmick. People are not projects. You don't have to have the right words. You just simply have to be in their lives, which means if we don't enter, we're probably not going to get to speak. And then maybe lastly, just consider this, okay, is that the end goal of proclamation is not proclamation. The end goal is this big, massive job description, if you will, that Jesus gave the entire church. Like if we have one collective thing that we're supposed to get done on earth, it's talked about in 1 Corinthians, where we've heard about the ministry of, remember that God has reconciled all the world to himself, not counting men's sins against them. That's another talk, by the way. His whole reconciling work, not counting men's sins against them. Where we in the church, our whole lives, we've been counting men's sins against them to try to, again, we'll talk about that another day. But Jesus reconciles, then he says, that same way I've been reconciling, I now give you guys, us, the ministry of reconciliation. The end goal is not that you talk for God. The end goal is that you invite them into the family. Jesus did not come to make converts. He came to adopt sons and daughters. And your posture towards them isn't that you somehow get to get it out there. It's that you invite them into your family. You're not going to be able to do that by inviting them to a church service. And so you've done the right thing underground. You've set it up into small little structural networks called micro-churches where you can actually bring them into your family, right? Your family of missionaries, and you will all get to proclaim together. On one day it will be Hugh Halter that will share a few things, and the next day it will be Cheryl. And the next day it will be somebody else. The witness of the gospel really, in our missionary context, will be completely related to the community. You have to be a part of a reconciling people. Does that make sense? And so at the end of the day, relax. You don't have to ever go at anybody, but it does matter how you live. I had one friend that said, yeah, Halter, it's easy for you. I'm just not gifted in evangelism. I said, that's not true. I said, it's just that sometimes you're a jerk. Okay? It matters. You matter. And so at the end of that passage of reconciling the world, remember it says, so you, Hugh Halter, be reconciled. Like if you want to be a part of the reconciling work, be reconciled to God yourself. Just like I was 2 days ago in the living room where I literally said, God, thank you for, again, your message of the simple gospel. I literally came back to God 2 days ago. I've been struggling. I've been dark. I've been working hard for Jesus. I've still loved him, but I've been holding some things against him. I've been mad. I've been dark, cynical, tired. 2 days ago, literally, I went, I'm in again. Be reconciled to Jesus. If you want to proclaim Jesus to your friends, come to Jesus. Let him do a do-over. If you're tired tonight, I get it. This stuff is brutal. This helping people thing, it doesn't work, does it? You're cynical because you haven't seen the power of God in a long time. When you don't see the power of God show up, you just start to wonder if the whole thing is true or not. And then the people you give time to, they don't respond to you back the way you want. It's even hard in your family, right? Spouse isn't with you right now. Kids aren't into it. So you might have said, I don't want to talk about you. Be reconciled to Jesus tonight. It's the same simple message. It can change you tonight just like it changed you the first time. I'll need to get re-evangelized probably in a few weeks. So stop overthinking it. The story is true. The message is truer. The man of the message. It's the best thing I've ever heard. So receive it in Jesus' name.